Okay.
For those of you joining us on Facebook, we'll get started in a moment. Welcome to the webinar.
Okay. We're just about to start recording as well. So I think we're ready to go. So welcome to this. I think we're at our 50th webinar in the Career Path Development webinar series, which I think is pretty amazing. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mina Gavell. Mina is in Tajikistan right now. I don't really want to say too much about her because most of her presentation will tell us more about her journeys and her travels. I did just take a sneak peek at her map of places worked, and I think she will have something to say to everybody who joins us both on Facebook and here on Zoom. So welcome. Without more ado, I'd like to pass it over to Mina to introduce herself and to introduce her presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz, Lynn for introducing me. And also I wanted to thank Liz, Linda, and Gulia for making this happen today. I'm very happy to be here. It is quite an honor, especially I knew this had been going on for a while, but 50, I'm impressed. Very impressed. And before we get underway, I do also want to wish happy International Women's Day to all the wonderful women out there. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. So I am Mina Gavell. As I said, I'm coming to you from Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and I'm currently here with American Councils on their C5+1 project. And I'm going to be telling you about basically my journey and how I got here. And basically how each step led to the next step, sometimes not directly. Sometimes one step skipped a couple steps and then helped me further on down the road. You might also think of this, I don't know, I've often thought of the analogy of a career as a tool belt and how I've picked up a variety of tools on the way. So I am going to be telling you about kind of an atypical teaching career. And so I'm just kind of curious who's out there. I'd like to know how long you've been teaching, how many years you've been teaching. And also I'm curious to know how long you've been in your current position. So for example, you may have been teaching for 10 years and been in your current position for 10 years, something like this. So if you are here on Zoom or on Facebook, you can answer in the chat something really simple like this. This is my example here. I've been teaching for about 16 years, but I've been in my current position for about 6 months, so half a year. I see that Julie has been teaching for 20 years and been in her current position for 9 years. Interesting. So there's been a bit of a journey. I see 20 years in the current position for 12. Very interesting. Oh, you know, I knew Liz would have some extreme kind of ratio. 30 years and in the current position for 4. Excellent. I see that Firuz, who's actually Guli, has been teaching for 10 years, and I know her current position has been almost a year, I think. NB 8 years. Malika, you've been teaching for 17 years?
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yes.
you're not 24. You haven't been teaching since you were 7 years old.
No,
Oh.
I started when I was 21, I guess.
So we can infer some things from this. Well, you look
Yeah.
very, I always thought you were much. Okay, so this is interesting to me. I see we have a lot of seasoned teachers here, and so good. I expected this as well. So this may be a strange number to some to have been teaching for 16 years in the current position for 5. And I would say since 2018, I haven't been anywhere longer than a year, and this is by choice. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, my career has not been a typical career. I've moved around a bit. So these are the different countries I have worked in. I have 5 different countries here: the US, South Korea, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kenya down here. And just to give you a little more background about myself as well, this is English language professional in progress rather than English language teacher in progress. The reason for that being, in addition to teaching and teacher training, I've done a lot of other things that I'm happy and proud of. I've done a lot of workshops, webinars, things like that, including American English webinar. They have great webinars if you haven't checked them out. These are great webinars as well. If you're looking for, I don't know, activities and things like that, you can check this out on YouTube. I've also done some publishing in peer-reviewed journals. I also helped co-author a book with some former colleagues about different strange events in history, and there's activities included with it. And then I've also done a lot of conferences, including TESOL last year, where I was on a panel. I did have to present remotely since I was in Kenya at the time and could not make it. So this is just to give you an idea of other things that I've done and kind of fleshing out my identity as I think as a professional. So it did not start out so promising though. As you saw earlier, I've been teaching for 16 years and I am in my 40s. So I think for many of you, if you are in your 40s or were in your 40s, you may have been teaching for quite a bit longer than 16 years at that point. I went to university or college at the College of Charleston, and I majored in English, which seems like a great major for an English teacher. But I did not want to be an English teacher at all. That was never my plan. I actually had no plan. I just knew I liked reading and I didn't like writing, but I was good at it. So it seemed like a good way to spend 4 years. So while I was there, I got a job at a restaurant and I really enjoyed it. I made really good money. I bought a house. I had great friends and I was enjoying my life. But around the age of 30, I realized that I had everything I wanted except kind of a feeling of satisfaction. What I was doing was great for paying bills and things like that, but it wasn't really feeling this kind of deeper need that I had. And I happened to talk to someone who told me she was getting her TEFL certificate, teaching English as a foreign language, and that she was going to Vietnam to teach English. And I never knew that that was a thing. I don't know why I didn't know. I had no idea this was a possibility. But pretty much when I found out, I decided to sell my house. I broke up with my boyfriend. I got rid of all my furniture. I quit my job and I moved back home so that I could also take a TEFL course. And from there, I went to South Korea. I did this not because I wanted to be a teacher, but because I wanted to travel. And so it seemed like a good way to travel. So I found myself in this lovely city, which is Bundang, South Korea. It's just south of Seoul. You might consider it part of the major metropolitan area. And there I taught at Hagwon, which is a private school students go to after school. And so they were coming after school to improve their English. And the main thing that they did there was TOEFL test preparation. I was in charge of teaching TOEFL writing and speaking. And I think this was a good start for me. It helped me kind of hone in what students needed to learn, what kinds of things we would assess when students are speaking and writing. And also the test has a lot of structure. And as a new teacher with just a certificate, I really needed that structure. But I think if that's all I'd done that year, I probably wouldn't be where I am today because it's very boring. Also, I was at that time a terrible teacher, as I like to think many of us were when we first started out. Luckily, the Hagwon decided to branch out from TOEFL and to start to look more at academic writing. And as someone who had basically majored in writing, that was something that I quickly dialed in on and enjoyed teaching. Then this led to me creating an academic writing curriculum and the materials that went with it. I can't say that looking back, it was not a great job. I had no idea what I was doing, but I enjoyed the process and I put together something kind of usable. But it was a great experience for me. And then during this time, something more important happened. Although I started out a terrible teacher, I eventually became an okay one. And more importantly, I developed a really strong rapport with my students. And I saw that I was making a difference in their lives. And so I thought that, maybe I'll keep doing this for a little while. And my plan was to stay in Korea and to continue teaching. I went back home to visit my family and had some trouble getting my visa to go back and was doing this long process of sending things and waiting for things. And during that time, I met my now husband, and I decided to just stay in the US. I didn't know what I was going to do until I found in the newspaper, actually, back in the day, I didn't even find this on the internet. I found a job opening teaching ESL, English as a second language, at a school in Connecticut where I was staying. It's where I grew up, where my parents were from. Once again, I didn't know that this was a thing. I did not know that you could teach English to foreign students in the United States until I saw this in the newspaper. So I started teaching there. I stayed there for 3.5 years, and then my husband and I decided to move to Portland, Oregon. I stayed with the same school that at that time they had 50 schools throughout the country. And this is where I think I really became a teacher. I learned EAP there, English for Academic Purposes. So most of our students at ELS were mostly from Saudi Arabia. We had a lot of Japanese students and then a smattering from like everywhere else in the world. But they all wanted to go to university in the US and they needed to boost their English. And so we were teaching them English for academic purposes there. So it's pretty structured English. With our upper levels, we moved from teaching like grammar and vocabulary to content-based instruction, CBI. So we were lightly teaching like sociology, biology, things like that, with English language support. So I thought that was really interesting and enjoyable. And they also had to do a research paper before they graduated. And so I had to learn to teach research writing. And so my previous background in academic writing really helped here. And as a result, I kind of overhauled the initial curriculum that we were using. I also was introduced to project-based learning here. The afternoon classes had kind of like electives, all different things. They had like a newsletter class. There was actually a cooking class that we did, things like that. And so not only did I get to teach this project-based learning, I was able to create some of the classes as well. This was a really different approach for me. And so it really expanded my knowledge and my understanding of what teaching English could be. I also had never heard of the IELTS before, so I learned about the IELTS, what it was, how important it was to many students, and I became an examiner as well. This helped me out a lot later on when I would have students who were not not interested in my class. I actually had, once I caught a student watching an IELTS YouTube video during my class, which was very insulting. But I learned that I could say things like, hey, pay attention. This is a skill you need on the IELTS. And suddenly I would have students' attention. But my biggest takeaway here was that I learned to experience a multicultural classroom. I saw how cultural interactions happened. I saw a lot of different perspectives. I think I really developed a sense of empathy with all these different kinds of people coming from different places, appreciating what they were going through, where they were coming from. And it really spurred my curiosity more as well. I spent 7 years at this point teaching at this school. I'd been in the country instead of out of the country, and I was starting to feel a little hungry for the outside world. Also, I taught here for 7 years, but honestly, I still wasn't committed to being a teacher yet. It was just something I was doing. But in 2015, oh, sorry. I also learned during this time what it is to be a full-time teacher and spend all day teaching and then go home and spend hours lesson planning. Luckily, since I moved out of the US, I haven't quite had this experience yet, but it's an important thing to know how a teacher's job does not end when they leave school, that it is a lot of take-home work. In fact, sometimes I felt that I was working more at home than I was in the classroom. So this was really important for me to know, especially later teacher training, to kind of have more perspective of what people were going through. Anyway, as I was saying, wasn't committed to teaching during this time, but in 2015, I decided to go ahead and get my master's degree. The school that I was working with offered a program where they would pay part of the tuition, so I decided to just go for it. And I will tell you once again, I was reluctant for this. I had been teaching for 8 years at this point and foolishly thought that I pretty much knew it all and that I was going to do this program basically for the piece of paper. The piece of paper could get me a higher salary and open other doors for me. I was quite wrong. It did much more for me. I learned a lot about theory, which I think is very interesting. I know not everyone does. And also terminology, which is important. I was doing a lot of things, but I didn't know what to call it. And so learning the theory, the rationale behind why we do what we do, and then being able to describe it in a professional way was really important for the development of my career. A big takeaway there was also improved public speaking. Before I got my master's, I had presented at ConTESOL with a colleague in, I think, like 2011. And I was so nervous that my throat had tightened up. And I was talking like this in the beginning of my presentation. It was awful. And so in grad school, we had to do a lot of presentations, and I learned to kind of calm down, which has served me well because I've done a lot of public speaking since then, including now. I also opted for a thesis to graduate, and this was really difficult and laborious. I did a corpus analysis of the present perfect in daily conversation. It involves statistics. It was really difficult, but I'm glad I did it because it allowed me to graduate, and also because I went on to publish it as my first peer-reviewed article. So that really gave me a huge sense of accomplishment. And as I mentioned, I kind of thought I knew it all before I started the program, but through it, I really reassessed my teaching approach. I learned to not only identify what was important to me as a teacher, but to make that connection in my practice as well. Before that, sometimes I was just I didn't really have a rationale for doing what I was doing. And so this really helped me to hone that in. And then I think the biggest thing is to become an English language fellow, you have to have a master's. And so I was able to apply to the English Language Fellow program, which is what I did. As soon as I got my diploma, I applied to this program. This is a program that the US State Department funds and Georgetown University implements. This was 2018. At that time, I think there were like 150 English language fellows throughout the world. I know that there's at least two probably English language fellows watching this right now, maybe more. This is an excellent program. And so it was something I really wanted to do. So I applied once I got my diploma. And then I got an email saying that I hadn't been selected. And I was sad. They told me to reapply. But a week later, they said, would you like to go to Uzbekistan? So I was very shocked that after having been told I didn't make it, that I was invited. And then my next thing was to Google where Uzbekistan is. It is in Central Asia. This is the map of the country. Russia is up here somewhere. Turkmenistan down here. Afghanistan down here. And Tajikistan is nestled in here, where I am now. So the first year in Uzbekistan, I worked at a university, actually here in Urgench, so kind of the western part of the country. I worked at Urgench State University. I taught reading and writing to pre-service English teachers, so students who would be English teachers in the future. I also did a lot of teacher training and conferences. And then I renewed, and the next year they put me here in Bukhara, which gave me a little hint of Tajik culture. Although it's in Uzbekistan, the people of Bukhara are mostly Tajik and speak Tajik as well. There I worked at Bukhara State University, and it was my first time not teaching English. So here I was teaching pedagogy and methodology to future English teachers while also doing teacher training programs, conferences, and all that. So this was teaching pedagogy and methodology was really something different and interesting to me. This whole experience was huge for me. I really immersed myself in a new culture, something totally different than what I'd experienced before. I just really didn't know very much about Central Asia at that time. As I said, I had to Google where Uzbekistan was. And so this was something just really eye-opening, mind-blowing, transformational for me. Also, the education system was just totally different. The grading system, the way that classes are arranged, just everything about it was different. And so just having my mind blown again and again, I developed a great flexibility and learned to do a lot less assuming that I knew things. The experience teaching pedagogy and methodology at Bukhara State was also great for me. I learned all these things in my master's program, and now it was time for me to teach them. And so this was a really, really important part of kind of processing that information. And then also making sure not to do it as a lecture. You can't lecture a student-centered approach. You have to model it. And so that was really helped me kind of push my boundaries. This is where I did my first formal teacher training, was as an English language fellow. Prior to that, at work, we would take turns leading sessions, but it was just us and our colleagues, and there wasn't much pressure. But here we were, doing workshops and conferences and all kinds of things for large groups of teachers. So this was a big deal to me. And actually, I think one of the biggest takeaways, because my career kind of moved in that direction after that. I did a lot of conference presentations. I didn't have a squeaky voice thanks to grad school. I went to Kazakhstan, India, Nepal, did conferences all over Uzbekistan as well. So basically, this was, I feel, my transformation from an English language teacher to an English language professional. I was still teaching English in the classroom, but I was doing all this teacher training and kind of really felt more of like an educator professional. And so this this experience, I think, really marks that change for me. And it was a great experience. Lots and lots of wonderful people, including a member of this group, Linda Chu. That's where I first met her. She was actually in Dushanbe, where I am now. And so I was very privileged to meet her there. Everything was going great. And then 2020, March of 2020, everything just fell apart. I was in Kazakhstan when I got a message that I had to evacuate. I didn't even know if I could get back to Uzbekistan to get my things. I did manage to get back to Uzbekistan and get my things, and then the airport closed and I was trapped in Uzbekistan for a week. They had to charter an airplane to get us out. And I had no home to go to. What's worse, my husband, who'd gone with me on my adventures, he's a good sport. He just happened to be in Spain when the pandemic hit. And if you may or may not remember, but at the beginning of the pandemic, Spain was one of the hardest hit countries. So I couldn't fly there and he couldn't leave. So we were separated for a while. My best friend is a wonderful person. She took me in. I didn't want to live with my parents. No offense, they're lovely people. So she had this fabulous farm in New Hampshire where we could go outside and there were no other people and we could play with goats and horses and dogs and chickens and walk in the woods. And I could just go online for everything. So the pandemic was a really difficult time, but it was also hugely important for me. I'm online right now. I'm very comfortable online. I wasn't always. Once we got settled back in our new places, the State Department reached out to the fellows who'd been in Uzbekistan and said we could do online things if we wanted to. And so we said, let's do some things. We still had about 3 months left that we hadn't done, and we wanted to finish what we had started. So we decided to do a series of professional development workshops. And I remember before the very first one, we all logged on to Zoom and we were like, oh, okay, if I push this, can you see it? Can you see me? Oh, can you hear me? Oh, no. How do I mute? So we had no idea. That was my first experience using Zoom. And now I'm very comfortable with it. So learning to do everything online really benefited me after that, although it was not my first choice. I also applied for everything. I was happy to be with my best friend, but I felt stuck. I had no income. And so I just started applying for everything. I was applying for things I really loved, including this teacher training program in Uzbekistan I really wanted. But I was also applying for like this online teaching out of China using this weird app. I went through this like lengthy process and then they never got back to me until a year later. And then they're like, oh, you have the job. I had moved on by then. But it was it was really a time of desperation. I did get some good things. What is now, I think it's American English Educators. At the time, it was Access Teachers Corner. I was their STEM expert for the month of, I think, October or November, which was a really fun experience. But just an example of I was going for everything, including publishing. So because I had a lot of time on my hands, I decided to make use of it. I wrote an article that was published in English Language Teaching Forum, and then was later picked up by American English to turn into a webinar. And that's also when I got together, or my former colleagues got together, invited me to join them in writing the Histories Mysteries book. So I kept busy and I did a lot of things that I think were more tools that I could add to my tool belt. So I feel like I made the most of this difficult time. And my big takeaway was appreciation. We were really limited in what we could do. And so there was a lot of time for reflection to appreciate what I did have. I was very lucky that most of my friends and family were healthy during this time. And so I had great appreciation for those around me. But also, as I was desperately looking for work, I was really having to look like, what have I done? What can I do? And going through my career and seeing what kinds of tools I had. And it helped me to appreciate the journey that I had begun. And then finally, in January of 2021, I was able to get back out there. I joined American Council's ESN, which is English Speaking Nation project, as a coach. And this was back in Uzbekistan. In fact, I got sent back to Urgench, the city I first lived in. It's a small city, very far from the capital. I returned there for this program. And there, this was pretty significant for me in my life. This was my first time doing a long-term teacher training project. I had done many like workshops. I'd even done workshop series, lots of one-offs, but this is the first time over a year I was working with the same group of teachers, seeing them again and again. And if I had stayed, it would have been 2 to 3 years that I would have been working with them. And this teacher training also included TESOL's TCCP course. So this is TESOL International's official certificate course. And up until then, the teacher training I had been doing was mostly created by myself and my colleagues, who it's not that we didn't know what we were doing, but in many ways we were kind of just winging it. And here we were working with a set curriculum established by true professionals in the field. So it was affirming to see that I hadn't been on the wrong track with my previous trainings, but I also learned a lot through this too. It was enjoyable. During this program, one of my jobs also, in addition to teacher training, was I should be in the classroom 1 or 2 times a week, co-teaching. And I had never taught secondary school students before. I'd always worked with university students and adults. And here I actually had a third form group of kids. They were cute as could be. I had high schoolers. But this was a really fun experience for me. And also working with a co-teacher, I had 2 great co-teachers. It was really important to me to get to know them. This is great networking as well. A lot of people were involved in this. TESOL was greatly involved, so I got to meet so many cool people. Also working with the top teachers in Uzbekistan, that was a lot of fun as well. And then the biggest thing for me here was part of a lot of our program was direct mentoring and coaching of the teachers that we were working with. And I had, done lots of workshops where you're talking to 20, 30, 50, maybe even 100 people at a time. But through the mentoring and coaching aspect, I was directly involved with, say, like 20 teachers. And so I was observing them, giving them feedback. I went to trainings with them. I saw them training other trainers. And so we had a lot of one-on-one time, and I could see the difference that was happening. And this meant a lot to me and showed me that true teacher training really needs a mentoring and coaching aspect to it for it to be effective. I also had the good fortune of meeting Liz England here. You can see in the corner, as well as a lot of other fabulous people. Some of you might know the people in these pictures. So this was fabulous. I probably would have stayed there. The ESN project was probably one of the most enjoyable jobs I've ever had. It allowed a lot of growth. There was a lot of variety to what I was doing. I traveled all over Uzbekistan. I really liked that job. And I had been planning to sign on for a second year when suddenly I got an email. Because, so English language programs, English language fellows are limited to 2 years. But because we'd been evacuated, they kind of gave us a reset. And so we were allowed to, everyone who'd been evacuated was allowed to do it again. And so one day, it was actually right before an observation, I got an email on my phone and I opened it and I just saw, "You've been matched with a project in Kenya." And then the class started and I had to close the email. and I didn't get to read much more, but Kenya has been like the dream of my lifetime. Like since I was a small child, I love elephants. I love wild animals. Sub-Saharan Africa has always had a great draw for me in terms of its natural beauty, its people, its culture, just, I don't know, something about it. So when I got this invitation, I couldn't say no. And so next I went off to Kenya. I spent 6 months in Mombasa, living on the beach. I could literally see the Indian Ocean, the turquoise waters, white sand from my apartment window. It's monkeys. Actually, once a monkey broke into my apartment, that wasn't great. So I was there for 6 months. And then for the next 10 months, I moved to the western coast of Kenya and lived on Lake Victoria, where the weather is very mild. It's very mountainous and beautiful there. And you can see hippos pretty regularly if you like that kind of thing, which I do. This was a fabulous experience for me. And again, I was adding more tools to my tool belt and further growing as a professional. This was a whole new context and culture for me. I just spent 3 years in Uzbekistan. I felt like I was becoming partially Uzbek. And so now I was thrown into this whole new situation, which was great for my personal growth. It was challenging at times, but mostly I would say it was really enjoyable. The first 6 months there, I was supposed to be working in a university in Mombasa, but some circumstances prevented that from happening. And so I ended up working online with this group called LPAC, which is the English Language Professional Association of Kenya. It's basically a teachers association, English Teachers Association, although there's a few other people in the group. And I worked with them online doing teacher training workshops. And I was so impressed. These teachers would log in. At first, we were doing it twice a week. They joined twice a week. There was initially no promise of certificates. They didn't have to be there for work. They weren't being paid. They were just coming because they wanted to develop themselves. And I ended up working with them for about 1.5 years, and they were amazing. Most of them I didn't meet until, actually everyone, except one person, I didn't meet until after 6 months. And in the end, I got to meet most of them face to face. But it was just so inspiring to know that a community like that, first of all, existed and that it could exist online. I also learned here, one of my biggest tools that I add to my tool belt was to work with large class sizes. So if you're thinking of what a large class is, some people might be thinking 50, 75, 100. I had over 200 students in my class. I have never dealt with anything like that. I think 30 is maybe the most I'd worked with previously. This really pushed me to find different approaches, different strategies and methods to meet these students' needs the best I could. I can't say it was ever an ideal situation, and I can't say I ever met the needs of everyone there, but I certainly did learn a lot in my attempts to meet the needs of these students. And I definitely met some of their needs. I also had experience here organizing an international conference with like 7 different countries. This happened with LPAC, and so it was great to be working with this amazing team, seeing what it takes to organize something on this scale. We had like 150 participants, coming mostly from Kenya, but also from other East African countries. And then during this, there was a huge riot in the city that happened after. So that just made everything even more interesting. Definitely an experience to look back on. And then also working with this amazing woman, Rukia Mohammed, we did a contest for secondary school students that involved debate, speaking, and poetry writing. And as a fellow, English language fellow, I'd often been like a judge at these things or helped prepare students, but I never helped to organize it. So giving feedback on the proposal, on the budget, things like that. So these were really new things for me that I think that helped to add to to my resume and to my, I don't know, sense of professionalism. Also, I had the good luck of meeting Judith Agueno, who is also a member of this group. Here we are at the conference in Kisumu, and I don't know how, we were both there all day. She looks fresh and radiant, and you can see that, that I have been through the ringer that day. It was a fabulous experience. And so sadly, I had to leave Kenya because the contract ended, and then I was thinking what to do next. And I had heard about this project that was happening in Central Asia, that it was an English language program working with professionals in the energy and environment fields. It would boost their language skills so that they could participate in the global discussion, the global effort to face the challenge that is climate change. And I thought, that sounds amazing. So I applied, and here I am. I am in beautiful Tajikistan. I can go to this beautiful area. I'm in the city of Dushanbe, which is also very beautiful, and I can see these mountains from my house. This has been very different from me. And so I am definitely still an English language professional, still in progress. I'm still pushing my boundaries, still learning learning new things. Here in my current role, I'm the resource teacher. I work with a lead teacher. We're all 5 countries of Central Asia each have a lead teacher who help the classroom teachers who are teaching in the classroom. We have a couple of them here with us. But in this role, I do not teach, which is something totally strange and new from me. It took a lot of getting used to that I don't teach. I go into the classroom to do observations. I've done a couple activities with our participants, but I do not teach, which is so strange to me. I have administrative responsibilities, which is also something I've really never had to deal with. So this is another side of being an English language professional and a career path that can be explored. I've done work with curriculum and materials almost always for my own classes, and certainly never to the extent that's part of this job where we're either creating materials or we're working with consultants who create them. So that's also very different. And then the research teachers also do a lot of the policy development or give input into policy development. So these are all things that are very new and different to me. And I knew this going in. I was curious to see, do I want to go on an administrative path? So I thought this would give me a little taste of that to see if that's something I would like. At this point, I don't know. I'm 6 months in, so I have about 8 months, 10 months left to go. So time will tell. So far, it's been a positive experience. And I have a lot of freedom and flexibility with my work, which I really appreciate. And also wonderful people as well, including Gulchera, who is also an important member of this group and who worked with me to put this all together. So I feel very fortunate. So I know we have different kinds of teachers out there. Some of you are probably not looking to change your job anytime soon. But it doesn't mean that you can't continue to develop as a professional. There's lots of other side projects and gigs that you can do while doing the job that you currently have. So if that's something that is of interest to you, some things I would suggest is, first of all, keep track of what you do. Everything that you do seems obvious and important to you at the time, but as the years go by, you'd be amazed by what you can forget. So I keep track of every workshop I do, the certificates I get, all of that, because it's so easy to lose track. You also want to keep an eye out for opportunities. I am happy in my current job, but I like to cruise the job boards, TESOL, American Councils, British Council. I like to see what's out there. It's exciting to know the different opportunities. My goal is to get better at LinkedIn and to use it more. And then if something really does catch your eye and speak to you, go for it. You might not get it, But I do think even the process of applying and going for something, you learn a lot. The first times that I like did applications and cover letters and even interviews, they did not go well, but those things are skills too that practice certainly improves. Don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone. You don't know what else is out there, but we don't grow by staying in a comfortable place and only doing the things that are comfortable to us. And so you don't need to wildly push yourself out, but if you just keep pushing yourself just a little bit, you'd be amazed by what you find yourself doing over time. And then finally, you want to think about where you are now. What are you getting out of what you're doing now? Is it enough for you? And is it what you want? And if you're not getting what you want, is there a way to get it? In this job that I'm currently in, I actually didn't feel I was getting what I wanted in the beginning. And so I initiated a professional development aspect to the current project so that I could be interacting with teachers a little more, which is what I've learned I really love. So I hope that that was of interest to you. If you have any questions, I am happy to try and answer them.
Thank you so much, Mina. That was wonderful to hear your story of the unsuccessful beginning to all of the experiences you had in between that brought you to this moment with us. I think we all learned a lot. I'm reminded of how this global community of professionals really get an opportunity to exchange information from different cultural backgrounds and educational backgrounds. And that's one of the strengths of the Career Path Development PLN and us as professionals. And I love this, are your takeaways, you know, that you have to track where you are and what you do, look for new things, plan and do them, and then push yourself to try new things, and then take time to reflect. It's just a great, it's really what you showed us today. I'm happy to facilitate the Q&A, and if people want to put things in the chat, they're welcome to do that. If people want to unmute and ask a question, that works too.
Before they do, I just want to give a shout out because I couldn't see while I was presenting who's here, and I see that Austin is here. I mentioned LPAC earlier. Austin was the founder of LPAC and is the one who ushered me on my way through Kenya.
Well, we do have something in the chat. Tushali, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So thank you, Mina. I'm so encouraged by your story. I'm Grace from Cameroon, learned a lot, wish to know more about projects. And thank you, Liz, for the link dropped in Africa, the LTA. So did you want to talk a little bit about any projects that feel useful to share?
I guess Tushali, if you let us know more what I've done so many little projects within projects, it's hard to narrow them down. I think for me, the projects that are most interesting are either working with teachers or working with students. I like materials development and curriculum projects, and I know that they are important, but you don't get to see the direct impact. So there is something about working with people that is, I think, a lot more just satisfying and helps us to keep going. Sometimes in the middle of curriculum development, oh, why am I doing this? So for me, those are the things that mean the most.
Grace, if there's something specific that you want to ask, you can feel free to put a question in the chat. Malika said, thank you very much, Mina. It's been really interesting to listen to your story. And NB said, thank you, Mina, for sharing such an inspirational story. As they say, nothing is impossible to a willing heart.
No. Oh, that's a good quote. That's a takeaway.
That is a takeaway. Well, I have a question for you. Since you've been in so many different educational and cultural environments, what are some tips that you have for people who might be doing the same to, first of all, stay open to different ways of doing things, and also figure out a way to offer help in a way that the community wants it?
That's a really good question because I think it's easy to go in from my perspective as an American to go in and well, I'm the American here because you've been sent as an American to go to these places and you're often received, oh, an American is here. And bearing in mind that most of the teachers you're going to meet actually have a lot more experience than you do. And you also just cannot imagine the ways that your assumptions can be wrong. For example, just numbers. When I think about grades and numbers, 80 and above in the US is good in passing, and 70 is still passing, and 60 is that's now you're getting into a bad territory. I was in Uzbekistan for more than a year before I learned that that's not the system they're working on at all. And how could I have not realized that sooner? Because I was working on my own assumptions. And so before you tell anybody anything, what to do or what they should do, is really to talk to people, ask questions, find out what their needs are, and then ask multiple people as well, ask it different ways, ask it in different environments. What someone tells you while you're sitting in a classroom might be very different than what they tell you over tea at their home. And so just being open and really never thinking that what you know or believe, for better or for worse, is what the other person thinks.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. We have another comment from Judith who's here.
Oh, Judith.
Mina is an amazing person.
As is Judith. She is an amazing person.
Judith, is there anything, I know that we don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you want to say or ask at this point? We're so happy that you're here. Judith is part of the CPD PLN leadership team. So she's one of our leaders that's joined us today, and she does excellent work for us.
I am not surprised that she's in a leadership position. I know that she was organizing chapter LPAC conferences after I left Kenya, and that I wanted to be a part of them, but I had to go.
Well, if she might, I know that she's wrapping up her day there, so maybe she'll come back. Here she is.
Thank you. Thank you for those lovely comments. Thank you, Julie. Always love to see your smiling face. And thank you, Mina. Just looking at you and listening to you reminds me of those days when we were in the house and during, I think, COVID time, and you facilitate programs for us. So refreshing memories. I would say nostalgic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judith. Those were good times.
Thank you. I'm in a vehicle, so I may not turn on my camera.
Understandable.
Gulchera says, well done. It was a very good webinar, and I'm really lucky to work with Mina. And I want to say that she is our fantastic head of webinars. So she is the person responsible for why we're here. She worked with Mina. She designed the poster. She got this event going. She publicized it. So she is the engine behind why we are here today, and did a fantastic job. And we are very happy to have her on the Career Path Development PLN leadership team as well. So thank you so much, Gulia. We love you. We love working with you.
I'm also really lucky to work with her. And I would say she's the engine in our office as well. So that totally makes sense.
Austin says, thank you, Mina, and you are always inspiring. We still appreciate your work with us in Kenya. We still value your contributions at the U.S. Embassy Public Diplomacy section.
Austin, my first friend in Kenya, who then actually went on from LPAC to work in the embassy. So I know he's doing a great job there.
Well, this has been so lovely. We're kind of getting into wrapping up, but we really appreciate you taking the time to offer your story and your wisdom with us, Mina. I want to just call out a couple of people who are here with us today that you might not know. One is Liz England, who is the founder of the CPD PLN, and she is always behind the scenes supporting us and mentoring us, and she's the reason that we're all here and that we're doing this work at all. And we just love that you're able to join us. I want to just also point out Lynn Clark, who is a co-leader with me right now for the Career Path Development PLN, and she is this amazing tech guru who got all of the information out. She's been letting people into the Zoom room. She's been recording things, putting it on Facebook Live, and just a joy to work with. Did you want to say anything, Lynn?
No, just that you're also a joy to work with, Julie. Don't forget yourself.
This has just been so wonderful to have so many people from around the world join us to hear this. I want to let everybody know that we will be having a trailer going out of different presentations that will be in person in Tampa, Florida at TSOL this year, coming out from the PLN. So keep an eye out for that. If you can attend and you're going to be there, we would love to have you join for those. We also have some ways to keep in touch with us through social media, and Lynn put them in the chat so you can see them there. Just stay in touch with us. Tell us how you're doing. Tell us what you're doing. Do you have a webinar that you want to do? Propose it, put it in. We'd love to work with you and have your ideas out there. And Mina, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Is there any last words that you want to say?
I just want to thank you all for inviting me and for making this happen. I think Liz and Linda initially emailed me and cajoled me into this. I'm glad they did. And then when I kind of forgotten about it, that's when Gulia jumped in and made sure that this happened. And then thank you, Lynn and Julie, for your support.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're going to stop recording.